And so when I first Googled circumcision in 2012, the conversation has changed in 6 years. I know, because I've been paying attention. But 6 years ago, the general consensus was, between all news sources, ABC, NBC, Time, New York Times, Washington Post, Scientific American, and so on, was that circumcision was cleaner, healthier, prevented STDs and HIV, and was endorsed by the Scientific Academy, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Now, this sounded great. It created a coherent narrative in my mind. If circumcision was good for you, then of course I and all my friends were circumcised, obviously. However, I stumbled across a website that aggregated quotes about circumcision throughout all time, and something struck me about the Jewish ones. Let me show you. See if you can strike a pattern. Circumcision is a symbol of two things necessary to our well-being: the excision of sexual pleasure and to check a man's pride. 30 AD. The bodily pain is the real purpose of circumcision. One of the reasons is to bring about a decrease in sexual intercourse and a weakening of the organ. The fact that circumcision reduces sexual pleasure is undeniable. 1180 AD. Okay, well, these are ancient history. The foreskin represents man's worst animal-like urges. I like my animal-like urges. Impairment of sexual sensation is a special virtue of circumcision. 1985. Not too long before I was born. Now, these quotes didn't quite sync with the mainstream narrative. Was circumcision good for me, or did it damage my sexuality? Now remember, I was a 20-year-old male at the time. Not many things were more important to me than the health of my penis. And that still applies today. So I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't just let this incoherence rest. So I did what anybody should do if they're trying to learn about a topic, or any topic. I logged off the internet and I bought books. I bought books about the topic. And something crazy happened when I read books about the topic. I understood it. Isn't it crazy how books work that way? And what was even crazier that I understood was how insanely important and relevant the information contained inside these books was to everybody, how incredibly simple it was to understand, and how nobody knew it. Nobody knew it. So I did something diabolical. I learned everything about circumcision. I know everything about it, and I'm going to tell you. Buckle up, because it's going to be a bumpy fucking ride. So, the story begins 12,000 years ago. Sigmund Freud surmised that circumcision started as a step down from child sacrifice. So instead of sacrificing the child, you would just sacrifice an essential part of him, his genitals. Now, these genital blood sacrifices eventually lessened until just parts of his genitals were sacrificed, his foreskin. Now, many people erroneously believe, if you can believe it, many people erroneously believe something, but many people erroneously believe that circumcision started in the Old Testament, the Jewish holy book. Actually, Judaism adopted circumcision from tribes circumcising in the area. But if we take a look at the Holy Covenant in Genesis, we can see what it has to say. Every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised. Whether born or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. Any uncircumcised male will be cut off from his people. Now, a couple things to notice here. Every baby must be circumcised, and slaves too, because that was cool at the time. And if you weren't, you were cut off from your people, which was tantamount to a death sentence in ancient times. Now, Leonard Glick, who is a Jewish man with a medical degree and a PhD in cultural anthropology with a specialty in genital cutting, assures me that this is not even the original covenant. It was appended to the Bible in 500 BC for two reasons. Now, the first reason is the child is circumcised when he is a baby, so he has absolutely no choice in the matter. This forever forces him to look Jewish. Now, this promotes tribal cohesiveness, a primary objective of all tribal leaders, as they have a vested interest to maintain the social order of the tribe as they enjoy their status at the top of it. Now, the second reason is a little more interesting and plays to the underlying psychology behind genital cutting cultures. But let's use a modern day example, fraternity hazing. Now, when I was in college, I was in a fraternity. I know, shocker. Now, of course my fraternity didn't haze. Don't tell Brittany because I didn't use a condom, but I would have had sex with that goat regardless. I mean, come on, guys. She is a beautiful specimen. Can you blame me? Now, some people think that's a water bottle in my pocket. They would be wrong. But anyways, another audience question. Some of you enjoyed that more than others. Who here thinks that hazing is just a malicious exercise of power? A fair number. See, that's not exactly correct. See, hazing is an effective strategy if you want your fraternity to survive. See, hazing plays to an underlying psychological mechanism that enables group survival. See, what we do as humans is we ascribe value to the pain or suffering we endure as the price we pay to join a group or tribe. See, if you were just let into the fraternity, you could easily think, nah, and leave. However, after paying a great price in blood, sweat, tears, and body parts, you know it must be valuable. See, Judaic circumcision operates under that same psychological principle. See, ancient Judea was, and still is to a certain extent, an intensely patriarchal society. Male blood represented salvation, female blood represented filth, men ran everything. And nothing was more important to a man than his patriarchal lineage. And nothing represented his patriarchal lineage more than his son. Or even more specifically, his son's penis. So, to be accepted into this fraternity, the Jewish Brotherhood, fathers, likely younger than you, and far less educated, since this was thousands of years ago, were literally hazed into cutting off parts of their son's penis. You think college hazing is a problem? Circumcision is the most extreme form of hazing on the planet. And if you didn't do it, you were cut off from your people, which was effectively a death sentence. Yeah, we're going there. Now, Leonard Glick does a great job of summarizing circumcision in ancient Judea in his book. He says, in summary, the father offers his son's foreskin as a bloody sacrifice for what may have been a substitute for child sacrifice. He acknowledges, for what may have been, he declares acknowledgement of paternity, readiness to submit the child to a perilous procedure, avowal of sexual restraint of his own and his son in the future, and intention to raise him as a conforming member of the male-centered collective, and in summary, offers his submission to the elder's will. Whoa. Do you understand what this means? See, contrary to the popular narrative, circumcision was designed to mark us like cattle. Circumcision was designed to emasculate us like slaves. Circumcision was designed to damage us like we're not even human. That is what circumcision was designed to do. And all this talk about circumcision is not even the circumcision you'd recognize today. See, Judaism underwent an overhaul around 200 AD during a diasporic period. It was called the Rabbinic period, as rabbis redid everything to accommodate the needs of a more dispersed population. Now, when rabbis were redoing everything, they redid, you guessed it, the covenant of circumcision as well. See, around 200 AD, Jews didn't want to be circumcised back then either. So, what they would do is they would take their remnant foreskin and stretch it over the head of their penis, and over a period of time, they would look uncircumcised like a Gentile. Now, this allowed Jews of ancient Greece to better fit in with their Gentile peers, as many social events were done in the nude, whether they be public spas or athletic events or whatnot. Now, undoing the Holy Covenant was anathema to rabbinic authority. So rabbis took revenge. Rabbis took revenge. And to take their revenge, they radicalized the circumcision ritual, from just cutting off the overhanging tip of the foreskin to ablation of the entire tissue. So, the new circumcision ritual, the one that stands to this day, goes like this. And it's called the Bris Milah, which means the covenant of cutting. Sounds like a lovely thing to take your child to. Now, the first stage, which used to be the only stage, is called the milah, which means cutting. And here, the ritual circumciser named the moil will amputate the part of the foreskin that extends over the glands. If we take a look at this picture, that first dotted line is the original milah cut. And if we take a look at this picture, here's a moil cutting into the flesh of a newborn's genitals. Now, the second stage, which was enacted as an act of rabbinic revenge, is called pariah, which means tearing. And here, the ritual circumciser will sharpen his fingernails and shred the infant's genital mucosa. If one shred of genital mucosa remained, it was deemed religiously invalid. And if we take a look at this picture, here we can see the modern-day pariah cut, where the American medical circumcision is modeled after. As we can see, it's about an amputation of a half to a third of the external genitalia. And here we can see a moil using his sharpened fingernails to shred this infant's genital mucosa. Now, this baby doesn't look like he's having a very good time, but I could be wrong. Now, the third stage, and I'm not making this up, you can read it in the ancient rabbinic text, the Mishnah, which is still followed to this day, is called mitzitza, which means sucking. And here, the ritual circumciser, after he shreds the infant's genitals with his fingernails, will take the baby's red, raw, and bleeding penis and put it in his mouth and suck on it. Now, this is a modern-day picture of a moil performing mitzitza on this baby. He looks like he's having a great time. I'm not so sure about the infant, but again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Now, if these seem like extreme acts of sexual violence to you, that is because they are, and they have real consequences. Here we have a baby who has contracted herpes after a moil has performed mitzitza on him. Now, this baby is effectively brain dead for the rest of his life because this moil was satisfying an ancient act of rabbinic revenge. This article is from 2017, guys. This is not ancient history. It happens today. Now, to be fair, mitzitza was largely abandoned in the 1840s because an influential German rabbi said, you know what, guys? After we shred our infants' genitals with our fingernails, maybe we shouldn't suck on the bleeding penis afterwards. Good idea, Moses Sefer. Good idea. Now, this objective brutality is widely understood within the Jewish community itself, but most tribal members lack the testicular fortitude to stand up to our tribe. I actually got a text from a good Jewish friend of mine not long ago. He was attending a bris milah in New York City, and this was our conversation. The whole thing is so uncomfortable. The noise is the worst part. A lot of religious stuff, a lot of weird talk, very cultish, very uncomfortable. I mean, the father just looked at me and goes, yeah, it's barbaric. I mean, obviously, guys, obviously it's barbaric. It's called the covenant of cutting. It was designed to be barbaric. Now, to wrap up this Judaic tangent, although we'll come back, it's important to understand that Jews were largely discriminated and ostracized against throughout all history, not exclusively, but largely because of their covenant of cutting. Largely because everyone and their mother knew that these were radical acts of sexual violence. And the thinking went, although it's untrue, it's not completely unreasonable, that if these people were doing this to their own children, could you imagine what they're doing to non-Jewish children? Now, there is no evidence that suggests that this largely minority group that was often persecuted throughout history was brazen enough to kidnap non-Jewish children, but that didn't stop Gentiles from believing that they did. And that inspired prevailing myths called the blood libel, which was a prevailing myth among Gentiles that Jews would kidnap Christian children and circumcise and murder them. And now here we have a picture of one of these derogatory images. It was called the Murder of Trent. It inspired many pogroms. Now note the emphasis on the circumcision. And that is because throughout almost all of Judeo-Christian history, Judaism was associated exclusively with circumcision. And that is because compared to all of the other religious rituals, that one was by far the most extreme by orders of magnitude. Now, to wrap up censored fact number one, although it'll come back, it is irrefutably true that rabbis designed and implemented circumcision to damage Jewish children's sexuality. Now, this is a fact, It is an irrefutable fact. There are tombs of evidence to support this. Yes, it was done to mark us like cattle and to emasculate us like slaves, and as an act of submission to your father, but to damage our sexuality in the most fundamental of ways for life was also a primary objective. Now, this justification is defended to this day by Orthodox rabbis. And remember, throughout all history, all rabbis were what we would consider Orthodox today. See what I mean about censored facts? I can't just come out and say them. I need to explain them. Brittany reminds me all the time. Now, moving on to censored fact number 2. This one is a little less controversial, and it's becoming even more widely known today. Even College Humor did a video about it. And quite honestly, they did a phenomenal job. I'm going to play the first 3 minutes.
Hi there! Oh, I see you're circumcised. But wait, you're not Jewish or Muslim, so that's kind of strange, don't you think?
What? No, it's normal. What?
Actually, it's not. Hi, I'm Adam Conover.
I remember you.
Hey, Adam.
And apart from those 2 religions and a few African tribes, America is actually one of the only cultures that practices circumcision. Yet, most of us don't even know why we do it. Would you like to?
Not right now, man.
Oh, just get it over with.
To learn more, let's go back in time to the day you were circumcised.
God, no.
By the time your tip got snipped, circumcision had been a tradition for generations.
Would you like to circumcise Brian?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, his should look like mine, right?
Okie doke.
No! But the source of that tradition is real weird.
His should look like mine, right? His should look like mine, right? Yep, better cut him. I reckon it'll stop him from masturbating. What?
Yep. Though religious circumcision's been practiced in the Middle East for millennia, no one did it in the West until the sex-phobic days of the late 19th century, when puritanical doctors promoted it as a way to stop your kids from committing their favorite sin.
Observe the vile masturbator, the sallow complexion, the rotten teeth, and the open sores.
Actually, I think I have syphilis.
Syphilis caused by masturbation.
One prominent advocate of dick docking was, and I'm not making this up, John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of cornflakes.
My cure is twofold. A diet rich in flaked corn and cutting off part of the penis.
Victorian prudes like Kellogg just straight up hated sex and thought that by pruning your Peter,
They could make it less pleasurable, taming your base, lustful instincts. And, you don't even want to know what they thought you should do to women.
Just apply a little carbolic acid to the clitoris.
Yikes! Thank God that one didn't catch on.
This is stupid. Being circumcised doesn't stop me from masturbating.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's so weird we still do it.
But isn't it cleaner or something?
No, maybe in biblical times it helped prevent infection, but nowadays you can just wash your dingus. Circumcision has been found to somewhat reduce the risk of HIV transmission, but so do condoms, and they don't require you to chop your dick off.
Okay, but foreskins are useless.
Actually, Brian, the foreskin plays an important role in sex. It's a natural lubricant, contains millions of nerve endings, and it protects the glands from being desensitized.
Thanks, Bert.
Got it, bud.
But if you're uncircumcised, girls will think your dick looks weird.
Oh, it's an interesting theory. Let's test it. Does this dick look weird?
Yep.
All right, does this dick look weird?
Yep.
And does this dick look weird?
Yeah. All dicks look weird.
Thanks, man.